Hey guys, tonight we drift into one of those stories that has lived in humanity's collective imagination for so long that you almost forget. It probably started with one guy sitting under an oil lamp in ancient Greece trying to make a philosophical point. And yet here you are, yes, you, floating right at the edge of that mystery. The one about a city so magnificent, so advanced, so dramatically gone, that even thousands of years later, people are still arguing about where the thing went. And honestly, if you ever found yourself suddenly transported there on day one, well, let's just say you might not survive the first afternoon meeting with their engineering department. Those folks supposedly carved canals like they were doodling in sand. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, adjust to a comfortable sleeping position, and let's begin our journey tonight in a relaxed and pleasant way. You find yourself drifting over an inky blue ocean, the surface calm and slick like polished obsidian. The waves whisper beneath you, the kind of soft rhythm that makes your eyelids heavier than your best intentions. Above, a few stars blink lazily, as if they're in on the secret of the city you're hunting. You let your breath slow, and the water seems to hold you like a cradle, while the world around you softens into hushed tones. The first thing that comes to mind isn't the grandeur of marble temples or impossible technology. It's the disappearance, the vanishing act, a whole civilization going poof like someone knocked over the world's biggest Jenga tower and then collectively agreed not to talk about it again. The concept is so wild that even historians today tilt their heads slightly when the topic comes up. Some argue it never existed, others say it existed but wasn't where you think, and a few, usually the ones who own suspiciously many quartz crystals, insist it sank during a cosmic realignment. Academic debates get dramatic sometimes, but the real intrigue lies in how old this story is. You glide a little lower, and the ocean's breath cools your skin. As you hover near the surface, you sense the sheer weight of centuries pressing down beneath the waves. This is the sea that has swallowed cities, reshaped coastlines, and quietly hidden things humans weren't ready to understand. And somewhere in that vastness lies the memory of a city that might have shone so brightly it basically dared the gods to smite it. The mainstream historical nugget floating in your mind is simple. Atlantis first appears in the writings of Plato, specifically in the dialogues Timaeus and Critias. Not a travel guide, not a historical registry, just two philosophical texts that may or may not have been meant entirely seriously. Imagine someone 2,400 years from now trying to reconstruct your world based solely on memes. That's essentially what scholars have tried to do. Yet you drift further, and the water grows thicker with possibility. Even though Plato's Atlantis might have been an allegory, the idea of civilizations being wiped out by natural disasters wasn't unusual. Ancient peoples absolutely knew about earthquakes, tsunamis, floods, and volcanic explosions. They knew nature could get moody. They'd seen real cities vanish. It wasn't a stretch to imagine a great island swallowed whole, even if the version Plato described sounded like it went down while wearing a full set of gold earrings. You shift slightly, feeling the cool mist settle on your face. A school of tiny silver fish darts beneath you, glinting like loose coins. The quiet is soothing, like someone turned the world's volume dial way down and forgot to turn it back up. But under this calm surface sits a strange fact most people forget. The ocean floor itself is younger than the continents. New crust forms constantly at the mid-Atlantic ridge, pushing older crust away, grinding it, swallowing it. In other words, the ocean is basically a very slow-moving paper shredder. If Atlantis had been built on an unstable plate boundary, well, nature wouldn't have needed long to nudge it into oblivion. That's your odd little cold fact of the night. The fish swirl once more, then vanish into the deep, and your gaze sinks with them. You imagine a city bathed in moonlight, ringed by canals, with towers so tall they could scrape the low morning fog. The people walk with the kind of confidence one only has before learning humility the hard way. They're strong, skilled, and maybe a little too proud. Classic downfall of civilization energy. And although Plato framed their hubris as the reason for their demise, historians still argue whether this was metaphor or memory wrapped in myth. You glide past a swell, letting the motion of the sea nudge you into a softer state. Your breaths grow longer. The water hushes around you like it's encouraging you to sink deeper into the story. You let yourself float in that quiet, and suddenly, the idea of a vanished city doesn't feel far-fetched. The ocean has buried entire worlds before. Bronze Age ports, ancient temples, whole coastlines, gone, reclaimed, rearranged. History hides underwater the way dreams hide in sleep, quietly, patiently, waiting for someone to drift near enough to sense them. Above you, a pale moon hangs low, and the air tastes faintly of salt, like an old page that's been handled too many times. You exhale and imagine reaching toward the deep, toward whatever is left of that city, if anything ever existed at all. The ocean doesn't answer. It never does. That's part of its charm and its mischief. It keeps secrets better than time, and so you float somewhere between legend and possibility, knowing only one thing for sure. The story of Atlantis didn't vanish. It stayed. It survived empires, languages, migrations, arguments, revisions, interpretations, misinterpretations, and more arguments. Every century adds a new theory, a new voice insisting they've cracked the code. Yet no one really agrees, because nothing in this tale stays still long enough. The water laps softly, and for a moment you feel as if you're hovering right above the spot where the city once stood, if it stood at all. And whether it's the ocean air or the enormity of the unknown, you sense this quiet certainty. You're only at the very beginning of unraveling where Atlantis really went. You drift just a little farther across the quiet surface of the sea, and the moon casts a clean silver path that you follow without really deciding to. It feels like the ocean is guiding you somewhere, a place older than the stars reflected on its surface, a place where the very first whisper of Atlantis was spoken. And as you let the night wrap itself around your shoulders, the water shifts, and suddenly you're sitting, not on a wave, but beside a warm, flickering glow. A small flame dances, an oil lamp, the kind of warm, golden blur that makes your eyes relax, almost unfocus. And sitting across from you, in the soft hush of antiquity, is an old philosopher who definitely looks like he hasn't slept enough in several decades. Plato. You blink. He doesn't notice. He's already deep in thought, staring at the flame like it's a window into some bigger idea he hasn't fully pinned down. You watch him adjust his robe, lean forward on his elbow, and start talking to someone just outside your field of vision. And here's the thing. You quickly realize the first ever mention of Atlantis comes out of his mouth not with trumpets or gravitas, but with the tone of a guy casually introducing a story he thinks you're ready for. He calls it a tale passed down from Solon, the legendary Athenian statesman. Solon supposedly heard it from Egyptian priests who said it happened 9,000 years earlier. If your eyebrows are rising, that's normal. Historians' eyebrows have been rising about that number for over 2 millennia. Some say it was mistranslated. Some say it was symbolic. Some say Plato exaggerated for dramatic effect. And a few think the priests were probably just tired of explaining their archives to tourists. Plato's voice flows like a slow river, philosophical and calm, but with that little undertone of someone who knows he's about to drop a pretty spicy narrative, and you lean closer, letting the warmth of the lamp brush your cheek. He describes a great island beyond the Pillars of Hercules, a place of powerful kings, gleaming temples, intricate canals. You almost see it taking shape in the golden flicker between you, stone walls glowing orange, fields and fountains arranged with impossible precision, and a vast capital ringed with concentric waterways that shimmer like cosmic geometry. But there's something else in Plato's tone, a gentle smirk, like he's aware he's blurring the line between history, myth, and moral lesson. You catch it there, just before he shifts into explaining the island's downfall. It's the kind of expression storytellers make when they know you'll be talking about this tale for longer than they ever intended. You breathe in the earthy scent of the ancient room. It's warm, with that dry, papery undertone. Parchment, clay, the ghost of 100 scrolls lying nearby. The shadows cast by the flame ripple across the walls, stretching and curving like waves on cavern stone. And as you sit there, cross-legged, very much an accidental time traveler, you realize something slightly hilarious. Plato might not have expected anyone to take this literally. He may have been constructing a thought experiment, a narrative vehicle, something meant to illustrate what happens when a civilization becomes too proud, too arrogant, too confident that the universe will always give it a free upgrade. In modern terms, you can think of it as a 2,300-year-old cautionary TED Talk with special effects added by your imagination. Still, that doesn't stop you from wanting to believe him. The story feels too rich to be fully made up, too detailed, too atmospheric. And that's where the cold quirk of the night slides in. Many scholars argue that Plato liked to spice up his philosophical dialogues with fictional cities because they provided a convenient sandbox for testing ideas, like a mental simulator, a prototype world. But then there are the odd details, the geographic descriptions that sound too precise, the political structures that resemble real Bronze Age powers, the way the whole narrative slides into tragedy with a sense of something remembered, not invented. This is the part that academic circles still debate endlessly. To this day, people still publish papers arguing whether Atlantis was allegory, memory, metaphor, propaganda, or something else entirely. If you walk into a conference room filled with classicists and drop the word Atlantis, you may need to duck. The lamp flickers, and Plato pauses, as if he senses you drifting, not away from the story, but deeper into it. He describes Atlantis as a naval power, mighty and expansive, its fleets crossing the ocean like swarms of gleaming birds. He talks about temples plated in silver, walls decorated with precious metals, and a central shrine supposedly covered in orichalcum, a metal that may or may not have existed. Even the name is debated. Some say it's mythical. Some say it was a real alloy, Some say ancient translators just got creative. And as you listen, you can feel the history unfolding like a soft wave. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, ancient, patient. The kind of story that settles in your mind like warm sand. The philosopher's voice lowers. He describes a people who grew too proud, too confident in their invincibility. According to him, they stopped listening to the virtues that once shaped them. They drifted away from balance, and in that imbalance, their fate was sealed. Whether by natural disaster, divine decision, or poetic metaphor, they were swept into the sea. A hush settles over the ancient room. Even the flame leans inward. You sit back, letting the warmth fade into the cool night air around you. The ocean's quiet returns, gentle and steady. The lamp dissolves. Plato dissolves. The ancient walls fade like smoke. And you're drifting once again over the moonlit waves, carrying the first whisper of Atlantis with you, its origin, its storyteller, and its lingering ambiguity. And somewhere behind you, in the echo of that old philosopher's voice, you hear the soft truth. The mystery of Atlantis began not with a discovery, but with a story. And sometimes, stories are the deepest oceans we know. You drift back into the night air as the image of Plato's lamp fades, and the ocean stretches wide beneath you again. The waves seem calmer than before, as if the sea itself is thinking about what Plato just said, trying to decide whether it agrees with him. You let a cool breeze brush past your face, and somewhere between the sound of water and the whisper of wind, you get this faint feeling that the ocean is nudging you towards something a little more complicated, a little more puzzling. A map, or rather, a map that doesn't exist. You lower yourself until you're hovering just above the surface, your fingertips grazing the cool water. Ripples spread outward in slow circles, perfect, clean, geometric, and for a moment, they almost resemble those concentric rings Plato described for Atlantis. But then they fade, dissolve, and you're left with nothing but open ocean. No landmarks, no clues, no polite arrows saying, Atlantis was here. You sigh softly, the kind of sigh people make when they can't find their car in a grocery store parking lot. Because if there's one thing everyone secretly wants, it's a nice clean map with a red X on it. But ancient geographers were not exactly working with Google Earth. They were working with rumor, intuition, and probably a healthy amount of, close enough. You let yourself drift up, and suddenly the night sky becomes a giant dome. Your map, your blank canvas. Constellations glitter above, shifting and stretching the way they appear to sailors charting long voyages. For a moment, you imagine yourself as one of those early explorers, unrolling a parchment that smells faintly of smoke and sea salt. The lines are uneven, the shapes are vague. Some continents are drawn suspiciously small, others look like the artist sneezed mid-stroke. This is the world before precise mapping. A world where coastlines were rumors and islands were often added because someone's cousin heard about them from a guy on a boat. And you, floating above the Atlantic, realize a funny truth. If Atlantis had been real, ancient cartographers might not have had the faintest idea where to put it. They didn't even agree on what the real continents looked like, let alone the imaginary ones. There's a soft splash beneath you. A flying fish leaps, glides for a moment with a shimmering silver body, then drops back into the dark. You follow the gentle disturbance in the water like it's a trail leading somewhere, but it isn't. It veers off, loops around, and disappears into the natural chaos of the sea, just like the map of Atlantis. Here's a mainstream historical fact for you. Most ancient Greek maps placed the known world in a roughly circular layout, with the Mediterranean in the center like some cosmic VIP lounge. Everything beyond that, uncharted, hypothetical, often drawn with approximate shapes that, generously speaking, had personality. The Atlantic Ocean was considered massive, dangerous, and filled with unknowns. It was the edge of the world, the place where sea monsters went for summer vacation. So when Plato mentioned an island beyond the Pillars of Hercules, cartographers didn't exactly rush to carve out a new island in their maps. If anything, they probably shrugged and thought, sure, somewhere out there. You tilt your head, and the sky tilts with you, forming long lines like imaginary trade routes stretching across centuries. Map-making wasn't just art, it was speculation. Early maps often included places people wished existed, islands of gold, land of the blessed, regions with perfect weather that suspiciously resembled an ancient travel brochure. In that sense, Atlantis fit right in. But then comes your cold, odd little fact of the night. Medieval scholars sometimes copied maps from older maps, errors and all, causing mistakes to multiply over generations, like history's version of that telephone game where bring snacks becomes brick snakes. So if one cartographer placed an island slightly too far west, the next one might drift it even farther, and the next one farther still, until eventually the island existed in places no one ever sailed to. Some scholars today argue that Atlantis might have been one of these drifting ideas, an island whose true origin, whether real or symbolic, became misplaced again and again by the natural chaos of human copying. You let that thought swirl around as the waves rock you gently. It's soothing in a strange way. You don't feel lost, you feel unhurried. Like the ocean is telling you that not everything missing needs to be found instantly. That sometimes the beauty of a mystery lies in the blank spaces, the silence, the margins of a map where imagination takes over. And in that slow rhythm, you realize something important. The absence of Atlantis on ancient maps wasn't proof against its existence. It was simply the reality of a world still discovering itself. A world where even the familiar coastline could shift after a storm surge. A world where land could appear or vanish depending on who you asked. You drift lower again, letting the water touch your palms. The moonlight spreads across the surface like spilled ink, like the beginning of a new, unfinished map. And you can almost imagine yourself as a map maker of old, dipping a quill into the glowing sea and sketching the shape of the unknown. But the sea doesn't hold still long enough. The waves shift, reshape, disappear, just like Atlantis. And as you let the ocean carry you forward, that simple truth takes root. Sometimes the most important stories are the ones that don't show up on maps, not because they're false, but because the world wasn't ready to record them yet. The ocean carries you onward with that slow, sleepy confidence it has, like it knows exactly where you need to go long before you do. The moon drifts behind a gauzy layer of clouds, and suddenly the water around you darkens into a deeper, almost velvety blue. You feel a gentle pull downward, not threatening, just inviting, like the sea is nudging you with a quiet, "Hey, want to see something cool?" You take a breath, and your body sinks through the surface, not with a splash, but with the softness of slipping into warm sheets at the end of a long day. The water wraps around you with the temperature of a half-remembered memory, and you descend slowly, the world above fading into a muted silver blur. Then you see it, the first outline of a city beneath the waves. Not Atlantis, not yet. This one is real. You float into the silent, submerged ruins of Pavlopetri, an ancient Mycenaean town off the coast of Greece, now resting under about 4 meters of seawater. The stones rise like ghostly ribs from the seafloor, forming recognizable streets, courtyards, rooms. It's astonishing how familiar it feels. You could almost picture people walking through these corridors, carrying amphorae, chatting about the weather, complaining about taxes. Some things never change. A soft ribbon of sand drifts past you, curling around the old walls like a lazy cat stretching across a sunlit porch. This place doesn't feel tragic. It feels peaceful, settled, a city that simply laid down to rest and let the ocean tuck it in. You glide over a collapsed doorway, your fingers tracing the edge of a stone block. It's smooth, worn by centuries of gentle tides. Above you, fish weave through the broken frames of houses like colorful visitors who've adopted the neighborhood. And for a moment, you feel like you're drifting through a memory album the sea has faithfully preserved. This is your mainstream historical anchor. Pavlopetri is considered one of the world's oldest submerged cities, dating back around 5,000 years. No myth, no metaphor, just a very real community that ended up underwater, likely because of earthquakes and coastal shifts. So when people say, there's no way a whole city could sink, well, you're literally floating through the rebuttal. But here's your quirky fact of the night. Researchers discovered that Pavlopetri's layout was astonishingly advanced for its age, complete with complex water management systems and multi-room houses. One archaeologist even described it as urban planning before urban planners. If those ancient residents could overhear that, they'd probably nod smugly. You glide deeper, the water cooling slightly, and another sight unfolds below you. The Temple of Heracleon near modern-day Alexandria, or rather, what remains of it. Pillars lie toppled and half-buried in silt. Statues loom with softened features, and tiny crabs march across the stone, as if reclaiming the land for their own tiny empire. Heracleon didn't sink because of one catastrophe. It sank slowly over centuries as the Nile Delta's soil compacted and the land subsided. Nature took its time. Less tragedy, more gentle erosion. More, we're moving you downstairs, then we're evicting you from existence. You feel the weight of history here, but not in a heavy way. It's more like being wrapped in a blanket that smells faintly of old books and quiet oceans. A reminder that sinking cities aren't just theoretical. They've happened repeatedly, for reasons ranging from volcanoes to tectonic grumbling to simple land misbehavior. This is where the scholars start arguing again, by the way. Some insist that the reality of submerged cities proves Atlantis could have been based on an actual event, maybe the Bronze Age eruption of Thera, maybe an earthquake near Crete, maybe an early settlement swallowed before written records. Others argue that Plato's Atlantis was too perfectly structured, too philosophically convenient, too allegorical to be a historical memory at all. And as always, that debate is ongoing. If you put 10 archaeologists in a room and ask whether Atlantis was a real city, at least 3 will sigh loudly, 2 will say no, 2 will say maybe, 1 will say yes, and the remaining 2 will immediately start arguing with each other. The ocean carries you past another ruined archway, and you imagine how these places once looked above the surface, alive with marketplaces, children running through dusty streets, fishermen repairing nets under the sun. You imagine the slow encroachment of water. Maybe people notice the land sinking millimeter by millimeter. Maybe one day they just woke up and realized the sea was suddenly much closer to the front door than yesterday. Civilizations don't always fall with a bang. Sometimes they fall with a slow, inevitable shrug. The current guides you toward a sloping ridge, and as you rise, light filters down through the water in shimmering beams. You breach the surface gently, the moon greeting you again like an old friend. The night feels different now, wider, deeper, wiser. Because now you understand something essential. Sunken cities are not fantasy. They're part of the planet's natural rhythm, part of its long list of quiet rearrangements. The idea of a place like Atlantis slipping beneath the waves isn't strange at all. What's strange is how passionately we chase it, how hard we try to lift a story from the depths, even when the ocean prefers keeping secrets. You drift on your back, letting the soft rise and fall of the waves cradle you like a lullaby, and you sense it again, that quiet pull forward. The feeling that the sea has more stories to show you, and that you're only just beginning to see how rich and restless its history truly is. The water cradles you as you float on the surface, still carrying the silent outline of those real, sunken cities in the back of your mind. Pavlopitri, Heracleion, stones and streets and temples that absolutely, undeniably existed, and then simply didn't. The ocean took them, and the world kept going. You breathe out slowly, watching your exhale blur the stars for a moment. And then, without warning, the sea around you changes. Not violently, not with panic, but with a slow, rising weight. The swell beneath your back grows taller. The horizon thickens, like the ocean is gathering itself for a story it's told 1,000 different ways. You're not in one specific time anymore. You're in all of them at once. The sky above flickers, and suddenly, you're standing on a muddy riverbank somewhere in ancient Mesopotamia. The air is hot, heavy, and smells like wet earth and reeds. In the distance, someone is shouting instructions over the clatter of wood. You turn, and there it is. A massive wooden boat taking shape. Timbers stacked and tied with the urgency of people who believe the sky is about to fall. You watch workers hauling baskets, wiping sweat from their brows, arguing over measurements. A few of them glance at the dark line on the horizon, clouds thick and low, dragging their shadows across the land like an incoming curtain. Somewhere, a nervous laugh slips out. Someone else tells them not to joke about it. You know this story, of course. Everyone does, in some form. A world-drowning flood, a chosen survivor, an ark or a big boat, animals or family, waters rising, then receding. A new start. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest known works of literature, carries a flood tale like this. Later, so does the Hebrew Bible. And if you hop around the world, you keep bumping into similar narratives, different names, different details, same basic feeling. Water as reset button. You blink, and the scene changes again. Now you're somewhere closer to the Mediterranean, the air cooler, tinged with salt. An old storyteller sits by a hearth, children gathered around, listening with wide eyes as he describes a time when the sea swallowed the land. He doesn't use precise dates. He doesn't show maps. He just gestures toward the coastline, where waves quietly lap the shore, pretending to be innocent. You drift through stories from India, from China, from the Americas, From Pacific islands, tales of floods so vast they erase everything familiar, leaving only scattered survivors and a lingering sense of fragile existence. It's like the planet itself has been whispering one theme for thousands of years: water rises. Remember that. Your mainstream historical note gently settles into place. Many cultures, across huge distances and with no contact between them, developed flood myths. Some historians think these stories may reflect real events: localized but devastating floods, tsunamis, sudden sea level changes after ice ages, river systems overflowing in ways that felt apocalyptic to the people living by their banks. Others suggest that flood myths are more symbolic, representing chaos, moral cleansing, or social reset. And yes, historians and mythologists still debate exactly how much of these stories come from actual memory versus shared psychological patterns. There is no unanimous answer, just a lot of careful arguing over tea and conference name badges. You feel gentle raindrops touch your face. You glance up. The sky is darker now, clouds swirling overhead like massive ink stains. The rain is soft, almost tender, but there's a density to it, a hint of what it could become. The ocean beneath you shifts, and in the space between one blink and the next, you're no longer just floating on waves. You're standing at the edge of a shoreline watching water climb step by step up the land. You imagine being there, thousands of years ago, with no satellite images, no weather radar, no emergency alerts. Just the water, relentless, uncaring, erasing fields, roads, homes, entire communities. If you lived through something like that, how would you tell your children? You'd probably say the whole world was covered. Because to you, it was. That's where Atlantis starts to echo. You close your eyes and let the storm sounds soften into background hum. The idea of a great city swallowed by the sea isn't just a one-off philosophical device from Plato anymore. It feels like an echo from a deeper pattern in human memory, a pattern where the sea rises and the land loses. Over and over, different times, different places, same core fear. We built everything we know right next to something that can erase it overnight. And then, because your brain likes to collect weird trivia, even while you're metaphorically half asleep, here's your odd little fact. Some geologists think that the rapid flooding of certain coastal shelves at the end of the last ice age might have been dramatic enough to leave real, lasting impressions on communities. Imagine waking up 1 century and discovering that the shallow land your grandparents walked across is now a bay. We used to live there, someone might say, pointing to a stretch of water. The gods took it. Boom, seed of a myth. Of course, not everyone agrees. Some researchers argue that we shouldn't rush to tie every flood story to a specific geological event. Human imagination is fully capable of conjuring catastrophic water even without direct experience. But others insist there's too much overlap, too many recurring motifs, to dismiss the possibility of real, shared ancestry behind these myths. Once again, the academic world is, let's say, lively about this. The rain eases, the clouds thin. You find yourself back on the calm ocean, stars re-emerging like they've been holding their breath. The surface is smooth again, pretending nothing happened. Typical ocean behavior. You lie back and let yourself float, your ears half submerged so that the world above sounds muffled, distant. The water hums softly in your ears, like a low chant you can't quite understand, but somehow recognize. Flood myths, sunken cities, Atlantis. It all blends into one long rhythmic murmur. Maybe Plato's story was purely allegory. Maybe it was built on half-remembered disasters passed down through generations. Maybe it was stitched together from earlier tales of floods and fallen cities, wrapped up in philosophy and set afloat into history. You don't have to decide right now. That's the luxury of being here, in this quiet stretch of night, with the waves gently rocking you towards sleep. You're allowed to let the echoes wash over you without solving them, to feel the shape of the mystery without forcing it into a neat answer. The ocean around you glimmers faintly, each ripple catching a shard of starlight. You breathe in, slow and deep. Somewhere out there, in the crossover between memory and myth, people once watched water rise and wondered if the world would ever be the same. And even now, thousands of years later, you're still lying here, thinking about the same thing. Atlantis, flood stories, vanished coasts. They're all part of one long conversation humanity has been having with the sea. A conversation that never quite ends, only shifts. And tonight, you're floating right in the middle of it. The night around you feels different now. Quieter, heavier, as if the ocean itself is bracing for a memory it would rather not retell. You float on your back, listening to the small, careful breaths of the sea. Then, without warning, the water beneath you warms just a degree or two, like the ocean is pressing a warm hand to your spine. A pale glow shimmers below, not moonlight, not reflections, something deeper, older. Before the thought fully forms, the water lifts you, not violently, but with the slow rising confidence of a tide that has decided your destination for you. The stars above fade into a dusty haze, and you suddenly feel stone beneath your feet. Warm, sun-baked stone. You're standing on a cliff. The Aegean stretches out before you in a blue so intense it almost hums. The air is dry, perfumed with thyme, volcanic dust, and the faint mineral scent you only get on islands built from fire. Below, whitewashed houses cling to the caldera rim like seashells glued to the edge of a broken bowl. This is Santorini, though the ancient world knew it by a different name. Thera. You blink, and the modern scene flickers away. Now you're thousands of years in the past. No tourists, no iconic blue domes, just a thriving Bronze Age city called Akrotiri, bustling with artisans, sailors, traders carrying goods from Cyprus, Crete, Egypt, the Levant. You hear hammers tapping, merchants calling out prices, the rustle of dyed fabrics drying in the sun. The air is thick with the smell of olive oil and wet clay. It feels alive, prosperous, utterly unaware of what's coming. A sharp tremor bites through the ground. It's small, enough to make pottery jars rattle, enough for a few people to pause, exchange glances, decide it's nothing, and carry on with their day. A few cats scurry into alleys. A fisherman mutters a short prayer, not a dramatic one, more like a polite reminder to the gods to calm down. But you know what they don't. These tremors are only the opening notes. The ocean shifts beneath you again, and suddenly you're standing farther back in time, or forward. Hard to tell, because now you're inside the volcano itself, seeing it from the perspective of pressure and magma and unforgiving geological patience. Most volcanic eruptions are like sudden shouting. Thera was an opera. You feel the earth inhale, a massive intake of breath lasting months, maybe years, pressure building beneath the island in chambers the size of cities. The magma churns, thick and volatile, swelling upward until it begins cracking the world open 1 millimeter at a time. Then, a roar. Not a sound, but an event. The island explodes. You feel it in your bones, even though you're only a visitor in this memory. A column of ash punches into the sky, rising higher than the cruising altitude of planes that won't exist for thousands of years. Buildings collapse as if flicked over by a giant hand. Days turn into night. Lightning webs itself through the ash cloud like angry veins of gold. The sea pulls back, not gently, not politely, like a beast inhaling before it lunges. And then comes the wave, taller than houses, taller than city walls, taller than anything a Bronze Age sailor could even imagine. It slams into Crete, home of the mighty Minoan civilization, destroying ports, ships, trade networks, entire coastal towns. You feel the impact ripple through history like a bruise slowly blooming across a timeline. Trade collapses, power shifts, myths awaken. Stories of kingdoms destroyed by the wrath of the sea, of civilizations swallowed in a single day and night. It's no wonder some scholars looked at this and said, "Wait, does this sound a little like Atlantis to anyone else?" The ocean around you softens, and the eruption fades like smoke dissolving into mist. You sit on the caldera rim, letting the wind brush volcanic dust from your skin. The Aegean is calm now, deceptively gentle, as if embarrassed by the violence it once held. Academic reality drifting in. Yes, the Thera eruption was unimaginably powerful, estimated at a VEI 6 or 7. It reshaped coastlines, disrupted entire societies, and scattered ash as far as Greenland. It didn't literally erase a utopian super-civilization, and the timelines don't line up neatly with Plato's telling. But then, things don't have to line up perfectly to leave echoes. A city destroyed by fire and ocean, a powerful maritime culture crippled by disaster, a memory passed down for generations until fact and myth braided together. You can see how Atlantis could have sprouted from those threads. You watch waves curl along the Santorini cliffs, each one hissing as it pulls away. The sea has long since calmed, but the memory lingers in the stone, in the geography, in the stories people still tell when the moon is bright enough. The island around you is quiet, not peaceful, just patient. You lie back on the warm volcanic rock, the stars blinking into place overhead once more. The caldera below is a perfect crescent, like a bite taken out of the island, a reminder of a night when the earth lost its temper and humanity tried to make sense of it. Atlantis? Maybe not. But something close enough to make your imagination sit up a little straighter. The waves whisper up the cliffside, brushing your thoughts towards sleep. Thera fades, but its shadow stays with you. The kind of shadow you feel rather than see. The kind of shadow powerful enough to start a myth. You're still lying on that warm volcanic stone when the breeze shifts. Just a little. Enough to remind you that the island beneath you, magnificent as it is, didn't build itself. No civilization rises from dust and clay without hands that know what to do with dust and clay. And before you can think twice, the Aegean light dims, the cliffs sink away, and you're suddenly standing in the middle of a construction site, but not the chaotic 10 men yelling at a pile of rebar type of site you see on Earth today. This one is strangely calm, organized, suspiciously efficient. Honestly, if modern teams work like this, half the world's skyscrapers would be finished 6 months early and under budget. You look around. Massive blocks of stone glide past you on wooden sledges. Ropes creak. Workers move in a rhythm so smooth it feels choreographed. No one's panicking, no one's shouting. The guy nearest you lifts a column capital like it's no big deal. You try to remind yourself this is the Bronze Age, and people are not supposed to have this kind of ergonomic confidence. These are ancient engineers, the kind history books praise but still don't fully understand. You follow a group of them toward a half-built structure, its columns perfectly aligned, its drainage channels angled with a precision that would impress a modern civil engineer. A man with sunburned cheeks gestures for you to keep up, and you do, even though you have absolutely no qualifications to be on this site. You don't even have a hard hat. If OSHA existed right now, you'd be in trouble. A warm voice behind you chuckles. You're wondering how they pulled all this off, aren't you? You turn, expecting a foreman. Instead, you find yourself staring at a long timeline stretched across the sky, like someone unfurled a giant scroll above the world. You see pyramids rising, ziggurats stacking upward, Roman aqueducts marching across Europe, Maya temples climbing toward the sun. It's all there, centuries apart, yet somehow layered together, as if you're standing in the workshop of all human engineering. You realize something. Humans didn't suddenly get smart. They've been smart, very smart. And Atlantis, whoever or whatever they were, entered legend because people believed they were even smarter. You step forward, watching a mason's smooth volcanic ash plaster across a wall. The material looks almost modern, smooth, strong, water-resistant. The engineer next to him draws a quick diagram on a clay tablet, a cross-section of a drainage system that uses gravity and slopes so elegantly you can't help but raise an impressed eyebrow. Some academics argue ancient civilizations knew way more than we're comfortable admitting. Others insist we're reading too much into clever solutions. And then there's the ongoing debate you hear whispered through the site like a breeze. Did ancient engineers worldwide independently develop similar ideas? Or was there more cultural exchange than we think? No one agrees. Even now, historians still argue about it. But you can see why these conversations happen. You stroll through an avenue of stone blocks, each one cut with puzzling accuracy. You run your fingers along the surface. Not sharp, not rough, just clean, purposeful. Someone shaped it with intention, with geometry humming in the back of their mind. Someone knew how to balance weight, distribute pressure, avoid collapse. If a people like this were ever caught in a catastrophic disaster, say, a volcanic eruption, a sudden flood, a shifting coastline, you can imagine how stories would grow, how memory would exaggerate, how a skilled, real civilization might evolve into a legendary, impossibly advanced one. Atlantis was described as having complex canals, grand walls, circular city rings, metal alloys with names you've never heard of. You look at the workers around you and think, yeah, I could believe these folks might have built something like that. Not literally Atlantis, of course. You're not trying to start an academic war tonight. But the seed of the idea, the kind of engineering mastery that makes someone centuries later go, wait, who were these people? That definitely feels familiar. A breeze sweeps across the site. The workers fade, replaced by silhouettes of other ancient builders, Egyptian stonecutters chiseling with copper tools, Mesoamerican architects aligning pyramids with the stars, Roman engineers measuring aqueduct gradients with astonishing precision. They flicker like lanterns in the dark, each one a little testament to what humans can do with time, creativity, and a stubborn refusal to accept impossible. You take a quiet breath. The more you watch, the more Atlantis stops feeling like a fairy tale and starts feeling like a mosaic, a reflection of every ancient engineer who ever looked at a block of stone and thought, yeah, I can make that do something cool. The scene around you dims once more, the tools falling still, the dust settling as the construction site melts back into ocean mist. You're floating again, buoyant, weightless, carried by a sea that seems almost proud of the memory it just showed you. Atlantis may not have been real, or maybe it was real, but not in the way we imagine. Or maybe it was simply the world's greatest compliment to ancient engineers, a myth born from the quiet genius of people who built so well, so precisely, that thousands of years later, we're still whispering the word Atlantis. The ocean sighs beneath you. You let your eyes soften. Another current nudges you forward. The current that nudges you forward isn't strong. It's more like a lazy tap on the shoulder. The kind you'd get from a friend who wants to show you something mildly interesting, not life-changing. Though, to be fair, the ocean's definition of interesting is usually a little dramatic. You drift downward through warm blue water that slowly cools into a deeper, inkier shade. Sunlight thins, colors fade. The world softens into shadowy silhouettes, like someone dimmed the brightness on reality. You think you should feel uneasy, but the descent is gentle, almost cozy, like being lowered into a giant, lukewarm blanket. Then, emerging from the gloom, you see it, a ridge. Not a small ridge, not a polite ridge. This is a mountain chain the size of an entire continent, stretching across the Atlantic like a spine. The Mid-Atlantic Ridge, the longest mountain range most people will never see because it lives underwater like a very shy dragon. You glide alongside it, running your hand over rock that once glowed red hot from Earth's molten breath. Now it's cold, quiet, coated with sediment older than entire civilizations. You feel the texture, rippled in places, smooth in others, and the ocean's voice drifts into your ear, something like, yeah, I've been busy for a few million years. What about it? A small cluster of researchers materializes in front of you, not literally, but as a faint memory shimmer, as if the sea is showing you a highlight reel of human curiosity. They're examining core samples, pulling up long cylinders of layered mud. When sliced open, these cores reveal thin stripes of light and dark, like the Earth has been quietly keeping a diary. And here's the fun part. Sometimes those stripes show anomalies, metal concentrations where there shouldn't be any, pollen from unknown sources, odd shifts in microfossils. Not enough to prove anything wild, just enough to make people tilt their head and go, huh, that's strange. A perfect phrase for sleep stories and scientific conferences alike. The ocean sweeps you sideways, and now you're drifting over a patch of seafloor dotted with what look like ruins. Rectangular shapes, flat surfaces, straight lines, patterns that, if you squint, and let's be honest, squinting is scientifically endorsed for deep-sea mysteries, almost resemble streets or walls. Almost. The sea gently clears its throat, as if reminding you not to get too carried away. These shapes, it explains in its own watery way, are usually natural formations, fractures from plate tectonics, volcanic activity, erosion, playing Tetris with rocks over thousands of years. Your brain loves patterns. That doesn't mean reality is obligated to produce Atlantis just because your imagination zoomed in too hard. Still, there are the stories. A few old oceanographers swore they'd seen pavements or roads on the seafloor. Sonar scans occasionally produce shapes that look just a little too crisp. Some divers in the 20th century claimed they found steps, which geologists later said were basalt formations, and you hear the familiar phrase drifting past again. Scholars still debate the interpretations. That line is becoming a theme for this entire journey. You swim closer to a basalt formation, hexagonal columns arranged like the floor tiles of a palace whose architect had a mild obsession with geometry. You almost expect to find a plaque that reads, "Atlantean lobby, please wipe feet before entering." But no, just geology doing its thing. You float on, following long threads of suspended sediment that twist through the water like ghostly ribbons. They're leftovers from underwater landslides, massive ones, the kind that could knock coastlines sideways and drench myths with salty inspiration. Some scientists think ancient seafloor collapses might have caused coastal flooding events, the sort that leave villages underwater and generations whispering about a great city swallowed by the sea. The pieces don't prove Atlantis existed, but they do explain how a legend like that could grow naturally. A gentle current pushes you deeper still until you hover above a ridge crack. Warm water trickles upward, the ocean's version of a natural radiator. You feel the temperature shift around your ankles. These are hydrothermal vents, mineral-rich chimneys that support alien-like ecosystems. Tube worms wave softly in the dark. Microbes glow faintly. Tiny organisms drift like free-floating lanterns. You wonder if something so bizarre and complex can survive down here in total darkness. Who's to say ancient people didn't find strange formations and assume a civilization once lived beneath the waves? Again, the sea doesn't confirm. The sea doesn't deny. It just lets you think. You drift upward again, rising through layers of water like a slow elevator ride through the Earth's memory. The ridge stretches beneath you, ancient and indifferent, carrying clues that aren't quite clues, just enough mystery to keep the human imagination warm at night. And as you breach into brighter blue, you realize something. Atlantis may not hide here, but the ocean definitely enjoys letting you wonder. It's like it's saying, "Look, I'm not giving you the answers, but I'll give you enough breadcrumbs to stay entertained." And honestly, that feels fair. The current nudges you westward now, toward a horizon rimmed with golden light. The water sparkles like it's hinting at the next thought, the next theory, the next misplaced clue in humanity's very long game of where did Atlantis go? You exhale, letting the salt air sink into your lungs. Another mystery swims towards you on the tide. You barely have time to finish that breath before the horizon stretches, bends, and folds itself like soft dough. The light thickens into gold, then into a dusty ochre, and suddenly the Atlantic around you drains away like bathwater. You blink and find yourself standing on the deck of an ancient ship, a creaky one, a wooden one, the kind that would absolutely not pass a modern safety inspection, but somehow feels charming enough that you step aboard anyway. Salt air brushes your face. The waves slap lazily against the hull. A pair of seabirds circle overhead, judging your lack of sea experience with the kind of side-eye only birds can deliver. You glance around as sailors hustle across the deck, sunburned, wind-rusted, and weirdly cheerful for men whose entire job depends on trusting the ocean. One of them pats your shoulder like you belong here. You do not, but you appreciate the confidence boost. The ship rocks gently, and the captain, who looks like he's seen both the best and worst of humanity, all before breakfast, steps up beside you. He lifts a hand toward the horizon, where two pillars of jagged rock jut out from the sea like the prongs of a broken crown. "The Pillars of Heracles," he says. In English, you'd know them as the Strait of Gibraltar. But tonight, standing here in this bronze and wood world, the place feels heavier, myth-thick, like a doorway the earth carved open on purpose. You step closer to the ship's rail. The waves narrow between the cliffs, funneling into a long throat of water that opens the Mediterranean on one side and the vast Atlantic on the other. It's a crossroads, a hinge, a border between the world people knew and the world they feared. You can practically hear old sailors whispering, "Beyond the pillars? That's where the map stops behaving." Some believed sea monsters lived past this point. Others thought the water boiled. Some claimed the ocean ended in a giant waterfall, dropping into an abyss that never stopped falling. And of course, some insisted that somewhere out there, in the direction of those endless waves, was Atlantis. You trace a finger along the railing. The ship creaks as if it agrees. Historians today argue about what ancient Greeks really meant when they said, "beyond the pillars," whether it meant literally westward into the Atlantic, or metaphorically, outside the known world. And yes, the academic debates are still very much alive. You can almost feel them sparking in the air like small, polite lightning bolts. But to the sailors moving around you, those debates don't exist yet. To them, the pillars mark the edge of everything. The captain hands you a crude map, charcoal lines on animal skin. The Mediterranean is sketched neatly, confidently. But the moment the coastline hits the pillars, the drawings get weird, vague, imaginative. A few islands, some shaky outlines, one tiny doodle that might be a turtle or might be a continent. It's genuinely hard to tell. You suddenly understand how easily the mind fills in blanks, how quickly a story grows when knowledge hits a wall. You tilt your head toward the Atlantic. The water there looks darker, thicker, endless. And you can almost feel how ancient travelers must have stared at that same horizon, wondering what secrets it hid under all that rolling blue. Your ship glides toward the opening between the pillars. Wind whistles through the strait, carrying stories like stray feathers, whispers of islands glimpsed through fog, accounts of structures seen at low tide, rumors of a vast plain swallowed by a storm. Most were misunderstandings. Some were flat-out sailor exaggerations. But a few were odd enough that even modern researchers pause. Like one ancient navigator who swore he saw the remains of a circular harbor, or the merchant who described stone walls under the water, or the Carthaginian tale about a land far west where the soil was black and fertile. Are these proof of Atlantis? Definitely not. But are they interesting? Absolutely. And the more you think about it, the more you realize sailors didn't need the truth to invent Atlantis. They just needed possibilities. Small, drifting hints that maybe, somewhere, the ocean hid something incredible. You close your eyes as the ship passes fully into the Atlantic. Immediately, the air changes. It's cooler, quieter, more spacious, like stepping into a cathedral where the ceiling is the sky and the floor is 1,000 miles deep. The sailors collectively soften their voices, suddenly respectful. Even the birds stop complaining. The ocean here has a presence, patient, ancient, slightly amused. And as you inhale the salt, you sense the idea forming again. Perhaps Atlantis wasn't a place people remembered. Perhaps it was a place people assumed had to exist, because how could such a vast ocean not hide something extraordinary? The ship drifts westward. The cliffs behind you shrink to two thin slivers. The world ahead opens wide. Your thoughts stretch with it. A myth doesn't need coordinates to survive. It just needs a horizon. And right now, you're sailing straight into the biggest one humans have ever known. The water rocks you gently, like it's preparing you for the next truth, the next misreading, the next beautiful mistake that made Atlantis feel so real for so long. You breathe in. The Atlantic breathes back. Another wave carries you forward. The next morning, if you can even call it morning, since light here arrives more like a polite guest knocking softly rather than a sun proudly barging in, you wake to a curious sound, scratching. Not dangerous scratching, not something with too many teeth. More like someone trying to erase a mistake, but realizing the mistake is actually permanent. You sit up and look toward the far side of the cavern, where the walls shimmer with faint ripples of reflected turquoise light. And there, hunched over a stone slab the size of a dining table, are three figures. They're small, no taller than your waist, round-bodied, slightly wobbling, and wearing what look like seaweed aprons. One of them even has a tiny monocle made from a polished shell. They turn around when they hear you move. The leader, monocle guy, lifts his arms dramatically, as if announcing a royal decree. Ah, the traveler awakens. Please don't panic. We're still working on your map. You blink. My map? The three exchange looks. Then all of them nod in unison, proud and nervous at the same time. Of course. The shortest one squeaks. The map of your journey. We're the official cartographers of the undersea passage. We record every traveler's route, tradition, heritage, archival excellence. He puffs his chest so proudly that his seaweed apron flutters. You walk closer and finally see what they're working on. And oh no, it's a map, yes, technically, but it's also definitely wrong in at least 17 different ways. Your starting point is labeled, probably here. Then your boat is drawn 3 times. The third version is upside down for some reason. One section of the path simply says, something strange happened, not sure what. Another, traveler looked confused here. And your favorite, a big circle with the caption, ocean mood unclear. You stare. You're doing great, but why are there so many question marks? The leader adjusts his monocle, looking mildly offended. Well, because you humans are unpredictable. You think too much. You hesitate. You change direction for emotional reasons. Terrible for mapping. The other two nod vigorously. One adds, once a human stopped for 10 minutes because he thought the ocean was giving him a sign. We had no symbol for that. They all sigh heavily, the burden of their profession weighing them down like waterlogged parchment. You try not to laugh, but a tiny snort escapes. Immediately, all 3 map makers perk up. Oh, is that confirmation? Was our guess correct? Did the ocean actually give you a sign yesterday? You raise your hands. No, I just liked the enthusiasm. They look crushed, so you quickly add, but I can help you correct the map if you want. Instantly they brighten again, eyes sparkling like little lanternfish. The leader scribbles furiously on a shell clipboard. Excellent. Please tell us, when you felt that downward pull near the moonlit patch, was it magical, emotional, gravitational, or, metaphorical? You grin. Yes, They freeze. All three slowly lower their pencils. The leader whispers, "Oh no, he's a poetic type." The smallest one, panicking, immediately writes on the map, "Traveler has unstable interpretive behavior." You gently take the pencil from him before he can add something worse, like dangerously whimsical. You kneel beside the stone slab and start guiding them. That part wasn't confusion, it was curiosity. And that path, it wasn't hesitation. I was listening. The mapmakers look truly amazed, as if you've revealed a hidden truth about the nature of travelers. They erase the question marks, redraw the lines, and slowly, the map transforms into something coherent. Still a bit wobbly, still a bit whimsical, but undeniably your journey, seen through their earnest little eyes. When they finish, the leader holds the updated map to his chest. "This," he declares, "is our finest work yet. A map that makes sense and still has mystery." The smallest one beams. It even has emotional topography. The third mapmaker shyly hands you a small object, a smooth, flat stone etched with 3 tiny signatures. "A token," he mutters. "So you remember us, and so you don't get lost again." Mostly the second thing. You thank them. They bow in 3 different directions, none coordinating with the others. And as you leave the cavern, the leader calls out, "Traveler, if you encounter anything impossible, please come back and tell us. We're running out of symbols." Their voices echo behind you as you step into the next shimmering corridor of the sea. The path ahead brightens. Something new is waiting. You follow a ribbon of pale blue light that flows along the seabed like a lazy river, trying to remember where it was supposed to go. The water here feels thicker, not heavy, just meaningful. Like each movement you make draws tiny silver lines behind you, which fade only after they've had time to think about their existence. Eventually, you reach a wide, open chamber. It's enormous, cathedral-like, but with architecture that's clearly designed by someone who has never seen a straight line and has no interest in correcting that fact. Pillars rise like twisting kelp stalks. Soft bubbles drift upward with no urgency whatsoever. At the center floats a single figure. Tall, cloaked in what looks like woven currents. Their face gently blurred, like a reflection you're not supposed to stare at for too long. They turn towards you, not with suddenness, but with the deep, calm inevitability of a tide. "Ah," the figure says, voice warm and echoing. "You've arrived right on time." You check an imaginary watch. "I didn't know there was a time." "There always is," the figure responds. "You humans just don't see the schedule." They gesture, and the water around the two of you brightens into a constellation-like spread of glowing points, tiny floating lights, shifting in delicate patterns. "This," the figure continues, "is the unfolding of the New World theory." You try not to appear confused. You fail, spectacularly. They smile, at least you think they do. It's simple, really. The world you know, the world above, it is not the only draft. Draft? They nod. Yes, your world is version 4.73. Adequate, functional, occasionally poetic, terribly inconsistent weather. Another wave of lights appears, these ones warmer, shifting like amber embers floating in reverse. This ocean, they say, belongs to version 4.74, a near branch, a sibling reality, not separate, just edited differently. You stare at the drifting lights. So what does this have to do with me? "Oh, everything," the figure says cheerfully, as if discussing weekend plans. You stepped off the expected line. Humans do that sometimes. Most don't notice. You, however, they tilt their head with an approving hum, walked right into an unrendered pocket between worlds. Unrendered? Yes. A place that wasn't meant to be visited until at least version 5.0. Congratulations. You're not entirely sure whether to feel proud or deeply concerned. The constellation expands, lights rearranging themselves into two overlapping orbs, one vibrant and shifting, the other dimmer, flickering softly. This, the figure says, pointing at the dim one, is your world, stable, familiar, somewhat noisy. They point to the brighter one. And this is the world you're currently in, still forming, still rewriting itself, a world that grows when someone interacts with it. You blink. So, just by being here, I'm changing it? Oh, absolutely, they say. Your thoughts leave footprints. Your curiosity writes corridors. Even your confusion, they pause, nodding with respect, has architectural potential. You're almost afraid to speak, in case you accidentally create a hallway shaped like embarrassment. The figure raises a hand and the lights collapse back into simple glimmers, drifting like dandelion seeds underwater. The New World theory is this: a world is not a place. It is a collaboration. They float closer, their presence calm but vast. Most creatures simply move through their worlds, but occasionally a traveler arrives who participates in it. You are one of those. Your first instinct is to deny it, but the figure seems to already anticipate this. Don't worry, participation does not require perfection, or heroism, or even knowing what you're doing. Good, you say, because I definitely don't. The watery figure laughs, a soft sound like bubbles escaping a seashell. As you continue forward, you will meet pieces of this emerging world, some ancient, some brand new, some still deciding what they want to be. They gesture toward a gently swirling passage on the far side of the chamber. Go, walk the forming path. The world wants to see how you're going to shape it. You hesitate. Wait, what do you want from me? The figure drifts upward, already beginning to dissolve into threads of light. Oh, nothing dramatic, they say lightly. Just don't stop being curious. Curiosity is the only compass that works here. And with that, they fade completely, leaving only a faint glow in the echo of their gentle laugh. Ahead, the new corridor brightens, soft, inviting, as if the world is waiting for your next thought to decide what comes next. You take a breath and step forward. You feel the water thin out around you, not disappear, just loosen its grip, like the ocean knows you need a little breathing room for what comes next. The glowing corridor you just stepped into stretches forward, twisting softly as if it's following its own daydream. You walk, and with each step, the shimmer on the walls warms in color, shifting from deep ocean blue to dusty gold. And then, quite gently, the world tips. You blink, and you're no longer wading through water. Your feet land on warm sand, soft, fine, almost suspiciously comfortable, like the desert took customer feedback and decided to improve its texture for visitors. A dry breeze brushes past you, carrying the faint scent of sun-baked minerals and something else, something old. Ancient in the way libraries feel ancient, full, quiet, and very sure of its own age. The sky blurs into a pale, endless dome. No clouds, just a silver sun hanging a little too high, like it's trying to make a point. You look around, and there it is. the Rishat structure, the so-called Eye of the Sahara, spread out before you like a forgotten fingerprint of the earth itself. Concentric circles carved into the desert so large that even from where you're standing, you can't see the full pattern. Only arcs, curves, hinting at something gigantic sleeping beneath the sand. Well, you mutter, no wonder people on the internet lost their minds. Someone, somewhere, definitely zoomed in on a satellite photo at 2 a.m., squinted dramatically, and declared, "Bro, Atlantis." You can't even blame them. Standing here, the place feels unreal enough that you almost want to put on sunglasses, stretch your arms out, and announce, "We found it, boys." Except you know better now. You've traveled through underwater caverns and half-rendered realities. If Atlantis had actually been here, it would have left a vibe. And this place? It has its own vibe entirely. A warm gust lifts a curl of sand off the ground, swirling it into the air in a lazy spiral. You follow it with your eyes, half expecting it to reveal some ancient structure or doorway, like in a movie where plot convenience is the real magic system. But it's just sand, lots of sand. And yet, the Rishat structure refuses to feel ordinary. Its rings are too perfect, too deliberate, like someone took a giant compass, drew a bullseye the size of a small country, and then walked away without signing their name. You take a step forward, the sand giving way beneath your heel with a soft sigh. So why? You ask aloud. Did people think this place was Atlantis? The desert, being a terrible conversationalist, does not respond. But you remember the reasons. Some fringe theories, some hopeful theories, some it was 3 a.m. and I had too much coffee theories. You walk along one of the inner rings, the ground humbly flat but steeped in the feeling of impossible time. Millions of years shaped this formation. Not thousands, not ancient civilization years. Pre-human, pre-language, pre-anything with credit scores, years. And yet, the circular pattern is so unmistakable, like a geological inside joke. The kind that makes archaeologists squint, geologists shrug, conspiracy theorists high-five, and historians collectively say, "We're not touching that." You pause and let the desert settle around you. The silence here is not empty. It's thick, warm, like the world is hugging its own secrets a little too tightly. A small swirl of wind tugs at your sleeve, almost as if the Sahara itself wants to whisper something. Maybe it's trying to say, people will always look for stories in the sand. It's what humans do. And honestly, fair enough. You crouch and let the grains slip through your fingers, each one a tiny shard of rock older than every myth you've carried through your life. Older than Atlantis, older than imagination itself. Somewhere deep in your memory, a phrase resurfaces, one spoken earlier by that cloaked figure in the shifting ocean. Curiosity is the only compass that works here. You straighten, letting the sun warm your face. The desert is bright, but not harsh. You feel centered, as if the rings around you echo something inside your own thoughts. But there's another truth drifting quietly in your mind. Historians still argue about this place, even if not for Atlantean reasons. How exactly it formed, why it's so perfectly symmetrical, why it looks like something an ancient engineer would sketch after too much wine. The debates continue, circling endlessly, just like the formation itself. You smile at the cosmic symmetry of it all. As you walk toward the outer ring, a shimmer ripples across the air, a familiar underwater kind of shimmer, Except you're nowhere near water now. The light bends, the dunes tilt, and once again the world decides to slide you somewhere new without asking for permission. The sand beneath you softens, the horizon folds inward, gold fades back toward blue, and the desert releases you gently, like a quiet exhale. The next place is already forming. The blue fades back in slowly, like someone dipped the edge of your vision into watercolor and let it spread. You feel the sand dissolve beneath your feet, shifting into something cooler, softer, almost velvet-like. Before you have time to adjust, the world tightens into a deepening shade of indigo. You're descending, not falling, not sinking, descending the way a feather descends if it suddenly decided to take itself seriously. The water grows darker with such patience, it feels like it wants to give you plenty of time to notice every shade along the way. Midnight blue, ink blue, that strange grayish blue that looks like it's rehearsing for a role as darkness itself. Eventually, the last warm tones vanish, and you arrive at the place the ocean keeps for itself, the deep sea silence. It isn't just quiet here, it's a quality of quiet. You take a step, though you're not entirely sure what you're stepping on. The ground, if that word even makes sense down here, feels like compressed stillness, dense, smooth, unmoving. There's no current, no drifting sand, no playful swirls of water like before. Just calm. A calm so big it feels like an ancient creature sleeping all around you without the slightest intention of waking up. You exhale, noticing the sound disappears almost immediately, like the ocean decides, "No, we don't need that," and politely pockets the noise. For a moment, you wonder if time works differently here. You also wonder if your watch would even dare to tick. It doesn't. Probably intimidated. A distant glimmer catches your eye. Not bright, just a grain of light suspended in the dark, blinking slowly like it's thinking about whether waking up is worth the effort. You walk toward it, your footsteps muffled into something so soft it barely counts as a sound. The glimmer becomes a faint blue orb, then two, then dozens. Tiny organisms drift past you, glowing like stars that didn't quite make it into the sky and decided the ocean was good enough. They pulse in slow rhythms, like breathing. You realize you're witnessing bioluminescence so gentle it feels more like a lullaby than a light source. And despite the beauty, a weight settles on your shoulders. Not heavy, just solemn. This is the part of the ocean that remembers things, not in stories or myths or whispers, in silence and pressure, and the kind of patience only geology truly understands. You walk forward, the dark opens, and then, unexpectedly, you see it. A structure, wide, low, carved into the seabed as if drawn by someone who didn't want to be noticed. It's not a city, not Atlantis, not even ruins, exactly. More like the suggestion of architecture. The shape of intention without the shape of certainty. Lines that could be foundations, edges that might have once been walls. Or maybe it's just the way the rock cracked. The ocean is very good at tricking hopeful minds. You stand there, staring at the ambiguous shapes, and the silence presses just a little tighter. Not unkindly. More like the deep sea is saying, if you expect answers here, you might need to take a number. Because here's the truth, one you feel rather than hear. Historians still argue about whether deep-sea anomalies like these matter at all. Some believe they're natural formations. Some think they're hints of ancient coastlines swallowed by rising seas over millennia. And some, usually the ones who don't get invited back to conferences, insist they're the remains of forgotten civilizations. You wish you could ask the ocean directly, just a simple yes or no. But this place doesn't do yes or no. It does maybes. It does possibilities. You kneel and touch the smooth edge of a stone. It's cold, of course, but not lifeless. There's a faint texture, like a groove worn by time rather than tools. Your mind races a little. You imagine ancient hands shaping this place. You imagine tides carrying away their stories. You imagine the ocean folding it all into quiet. Then you pause and remind yourself that imagination is a wonderful, unreliable friend. A soft current stirs. Finally, the first movement you've felt since arriving. The water shifts, nudges, almost guiding you like a polite usher at a cosmic museum. You follow it deeper, not physically deeper, but emotionally deeper. The darkness thickens, then thins in waves. The glowing organisms gather loosely around you like a slow parade. And the silence alters, no longer a blank void, but a listening silence. You feel strangely honored. The deep sea doesn't let just anyone wander around its quiet. Another shape appears ahead. A massive wall of rock, ridged and layered, a geological scrapbook stretching back millions of years. You run your hand along it, feeling the grooves, the uneven textures, the sediment pressed into patterns. A realization tingles in the back of your mind. This wall has witnessed more than any civilization ever has. Long before cities, long before myths, long before people pointed at the horizon and said, "Huh, I wonder what's over there." And now you, someone who didn't plan any of this, are brushing your palm across history itself. The pressure builds slightly, as if the ocean is reminding you to respect the silence. Noted. You bow your head a little, because bowing feels appropriate here. Or maybe your neck is just tired, hard to tell at this depth. The glow around you begins to peel away, drifting upward like bubbles of light, each ascending shimmer leaving behind a thin line of brightness that dissolves moments later. Then the floor gently shifts under your feet. Not a tremor, not a warning. More like the world beneath you is stretching after a very long nap. You take a step back. The darkness folds. The deep sea quiet exhales. And just like that, the ocean decides your visit is complete. A ripple of warm blue wraps around your body, lifting you as though you weigh nothing. The silence recedes, replaced by a low, humming comfort, like being wrapped in the world's softest blanket. The water brightens, the pressure lightens, and the deep sea realm releases you, not reluctantly, but with the gentle confidence of a host who hopes you've learned something, even if it won't tell you what that something is. Ahead, a faint glow opens into a tunnel of soft, swirling turquoise. Something new is waiting. Something old is waiting too. And the world seems perfectly content to let you find out in your own time. You take a slow breath and move forward. The turquoise tunnel narrows as you walk, the colors swirling like someone stirred the ocean with a giant spoon while thinking about their childhood. The water around you lightens into a soft mint hue, the kind that feels like it should smell faintly of eucalyptus. Except it doesn't, because the ocean is considerate enough not to overwhelm your senses. Eventually, the walls ripple outward, and you step into a vast chamber where the water is so still, it looks like liquid glass. For a moment, you don't move, partly because the place is breathtaking, and partly because you're not entirely convinced the floor will support your existence. But it does. A gentle firmness beneath your feet. stable, cool, comforting. At the far end of the chamber floats a circular platform, another one of those slowly spinning, softly glowing structures the ocean seems very proud of. This one, however, is covered in shapes, not objects, not creatures, not even ruins, stories. They float like drifting sheets of gold, thin as mist, each one carrying a faint imprint of motion. As you approach, the shapes sharpen into small animated vignettes, little visual echoes looping endlessly like memories the world forgot to turn off. You reach out to the nearest one. It flutters closer, curious. The image shows a city. Not Atlantis, not exactly, but something like it. Tall structures with impossible geometry, ringed waterways glinting under a young sun, people moving in patterns you don't fully recognize. And then, water rising, slowly at first, then faster. The image dissolves. Another one drifts by. This time, it's an island, lush, green, full of songbirds. Then a quake, a wave, gone. A third one arrives, shimmering with warm light. A continent split by fire, chasms widening like cracking pottery. People fleeing, ash falling like snow. Then darkness. You take a step back. Okay, you whisper to yourself. So this world collects tragedies as decor. Good to know. But the place doesn't feel tragic. Not mournful. Not heavy. It feels contemplative, like walking through an ancient library where the books have decided to read themselves to you. Softly, patiently. A cluster of golden fragments gathers near your shoulder, almost like they're eavesdropping on your thoughts. They swirl to rearrange themselves into a single phrase, written in a script you can't read, but somehow understand. Myths don't sink, they float. You blink. Well, that's poetic. The chamber hums, a deep vibration that shivers through the water like a slowly plucked harp string. And the golden sheets respond, spinning upward into a gentle cyclone, forming a wide ring above your head. Images flash within the ring. The Babylonian flood, the story of Yez, the drowned city of France, Cantrair Gwaelod, the Welsh Atlantis that may or may not be, rising seas swallowing coastlines millennia ago, ancient maps marking land masses that no longer exist, and hovering faintly among them, the unmistakable rings of Atlantis. Each story shimmers, blending into the next, as if they're fragments of a single long memory. Humanity keeps trying to tell, and keeps forgetting halfway through. You feel the weight of realization settle softly around you. It's not that Atlantis is unique. It's that Atlantis fits into a pattern. Civilizations rise, waters shift, stories try to explain what nature rarely bothers to clarify. You hear your own voice inside your head. So, is Atlantis even a story about a city? The chamber answers. Not with words, but with movement. The golden pieces rearrange again, this time forming a slowly pulsing shape. A heart, then a wave, then a fragile human silhouette. You exhale. It hits you gently, like a soft wave rolling over your ankles on a warm beach. Atlantis is a memory of loss. And humans never stop loving stories about what's been lost. Maybe because loss makes the world feel real. Maybe because myths let us grieve things that history can't record. Or maybe because imagining what once was is easier than accepting what is. Another swirl of glowing fragments drifts near, forming a new phrase. Historians still debate the origins of these myths. Of course they do. You smile at the predictable academic energy of that statement. Some scholars argue that flood myths came from rising sea levels after the Ice Age. Some think they're symbolic, metaphors for moral lessons humans kept forgetting. Some believe they reflect real disasters, volcanoes, quakes, sudden island collapses. And some, the quieter ones, think the truth is probably a blend of them all. You walk between the drifting sheets of light. They gently make room for you, like courteous ghosts. One brushes your arm as it passes, leaving behind a whisper of warmth. The images begin to fade, not disappearing, just dimming, as if they're settling back into sleep. You feel the chamber shifting, not physically, emotionally, like it's preparing you for the final step. A soft current nudges your back. The golden stories drift toward the center platform and dissolve into a warm, glowing spiral that points toward a slowly opening passage. You follow the curve of light. As you step through, a final shimmer brushes your cheek, not unlike a goodnight kiss from the world itself. The myths don't sink, they simply wait. And you, it seems, are almost ready to understand what they've been waiting for. Ahead, a gentle glow forms, the color of dawn meeting deep water. Something like an answer is close, very close. The truth, if truth is even the right word for something that's been missing for half a millennium, turns out to be strangely gentle. You expect some grand reveal, a flash of light under the waves, maybe a dramatic rise of a long-lost ship breaking through the surface like a whale coming up for air after 500 years of holding its breath. But the ocean isn't big on theatrics. Instead, it just lets you drift. Soft currents press against your sides like a guide dog nudging your knees. This way, human, don't overthink it. The water brightens, not suddenly, but gradually, like someone lifting a curtain made of light rather than fabric. And then you see it, a valley, a real underwater valley, cut so neatly it almost looks deliberate. Smooth walls, soft sand, a long path carved directly into the seafloor, leading forward, deeper. At first, you think it's a trench. Then you realize it's a trail left by something once very, very large. Your mind reaches for the explanation you want. A ship dragged here, pulled by currents so strong they tunneled the sand around it. Maybe it flipped, maybe it split, maybe... But no. The ocean answers your speculation simply by letting a ray of moonlight, yes, somehow moonlight, catch on the trail. And now you see it for what it is. Not a trench, not a crater, not the outline of a hull, but a groove, a wide one, almost like something glided along the sand, slow, heavy, peaceful, like a whale maybe, but not any whale you've ever seen. And then it clicks. Maybe the ship didn't sink. Maybe it didn't vanish. Maybe it was carried the way hermit crabs carry shells, carried the way whales carry barnacles, carried the way the ocean carries everything eventually. You feel a quiet laugh bubble up inside you, not because it's funny, but because it makes a strange kind of sense. Perhaps the ship was claimed, adopted, taken in by something that thought it was a particularly handsome piece of driftwood. Maybe the ocean isn't just a graveyard. Maybe it's a collector. And maybe this long, soft trail disappearing into the deep isn't the mark of a tragedy, but the footprint of a guardian. You hover over the edge of the valley. Water presses lightly at your back. Almost a question. Do you want to follow? The trail waits below, quiet and ancient. And for a moment, you swear the ocean is smiling. You follow the trail. Not because you expect answers, but because the ocean asks so softly it feels rude to refuse. The groove winds deeper into the blue, then into something darker, something quieter. The water becomes still enough that your own heartbeat sounds like distant drums echoing through a cavern. In the deep silence, every thought smooths out, dissolving like sand slipping between fingers. And then the trail stops. Not abruptly, not dramatically. It just ends, as if whatever carved it simply lifted itself away from the seafloor and drifted into the open dark. No wreck, no skeleton of a ship, no gold glittering with a final wink, just stillness. But somehow that feels right, because maybe the point was never the lost ship at all. Maybe it was learning that not every disappearance is a tragedy, and not every unanswered question is a problem. Some stories are meant to stay soft around the edges, blurred by currents, polished by time, carried gently into places no map can reach. You float there, suspended in the dim glow, and something in the water changes. A warmth, a calm, a feeling like the ocean placing a hand on your shoulder and whispering, "This is far enough for tonight." You turn back slowly, drifting upward. The surface lightens. The water grows warmer. The silence fades into a soft hum, waves against a distant shore, a quiet rhythm that somehow sounds like breathing. And when you break the surface, the night sky is waiting for you. Clouds parted, moon steady, stars arranged like someone tidied them up while you were gone. The world looks the same as before, but you don't. You exhale, long and easy, letting the sea wind brush over your skin as if smoothing the last creases of the day away. And with the gentlest closing of the night, the story folds itself around you like a blanket. Let the world be a little gentler tonight, and may your dreams be long and sweet. Good night.